Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show how to draw cat eyes in pastels. Now the colour of the eyes for this portrait are primarily a vibrant yellow, but they do have a hint of green. So I'm going to show how to layer those colours and capture that bright colour saturation whilst also getting the balance of details right. Now before I start with that, I do like to map in first of all any bright highlights that may be in the eye, and also then start to focus on the darker areas, the pupil and the surrounding eyelid. Now this enables me to focus first of all on getting the shape and the size of the eye accurate, because it doesn't matter how much detail, the correct colours that are used, if the shape and size of the eyes are wrong, then it will massively change the expression. So this is where I want to make sure I've got that accurate and focus on this right from the very beginning. Now once I know that I've got that correct, I'm just simply using my black Carbothello to do this, I can then start to focus more on getting my base layer established. But one thing I do want to mention about what colour to use for the surrounding eye is that this is going to vary depending on the subject that we're drawing. A chocolate Labrador, for example, wouldn't necessarily have a black eyelid all the way around. It might be more of a pinker brown colour, so we do want to pick those pencils depending on the animal that we're drawing. Now onto the base layer for the iris. Now because this colour of the eye is very bright, it's got that lovely colour saturation that I do want to capture, I'm first of all going to use those vibrant colours first. Now this is not the right colour, but it is going to transfer that vibrancy that I need because I'm using it first of all. Now this is one way that we can help to avoid muddy layers or these colours becoming too mixed together. So the way that we're going to use these colours here in the layering process is crucial. Now if I'd have started with the green that we are going to be adding later on, not this one but a slightly darker shade, then I am going to end up then trying to put my lighter yellow over the top. It's going to mix in with that darker colour and not give me the vibrant yellow that I want. And really at this stage, the areas of the iris, these layers that I'm currently putting in, I'm focusing more on not only that colour saturation, as I've mentioned, but the softness of my layers. I don't want any harsh start and stop points between the green and the yellow, and then this more yellow ochre colour that I'm currently adding on the lower edge of the eye. Now this colour here is where I'm starting to gradually hint at where the shading of the eye will occur. So I don't want to be mapping in my darkest shadows yet because again I'm going to end up creating a muddy layer if I try to then layer my lighter colours back over the top. So I'm working with a little bit more of a cautious layering approach, but I want to be making sure here that I've still captured that sphere natural shape of the eye. And in order to do that, the shading on the outer edge is crucial. Now if this area here is not dark enough, the eye will look very flat. It almost looks like it comes to a sudden stop. So as we continue to enhance our contrast with these darker values, we're going to add so much shape and form. It really is such a crucial stage. Now as I start to work on the top of the eye here, again, I'm really focusing more on the subtle layers. I don't want to be jumping in just to solid black if there is a shadow here. Now, this is going to be very subjective to each individual photo. If the eye has more of a sharper, one-sided light source, there may be a very dark shadow at the top here. In that case, you wouldn't necessarily have to waste time with layers. You could use more of those darker foundations right away. But here, this was more subtle. There was still colour that was visible. There was a slight shadow, but it certainly wasn't black. So this is why I've used my layering process up to this point, focusing more on the colour. Now it doesn't have to be the exact colour, but I did want to make sure that there was that hint of green. So once I've got that established, now I can start to focus on my values. So with my black Carbothello pencil here, I'm using smaller circular movements, more shading techniques and light pressure. Because again, I don't want to make this too dark. Now the next stage is to start to reinforce more of my highlights. Now again, I don't want to jump into a white pencil for this because the brightest part of this eye is that highlight at the top. So instead I'm using this lighter cream yellow tinted pencil. This is the Carbothello 105, and I'm just now focusing on some of that iris pattern. Now in some cases it might be more of longer lines that come out from the centre of around the pupil, but here it was definitely a bit more of a mottled look, more of that pattern of the speckles rather than lines. Now I'm not stabbing at the paper, I'm using more of a blunter tip so that I don't end up with polka dots, that's really important. And I do also want to make sure that some of these are overlapping. Now the reason I'm using this technique is because I'm not trying to cover up the layers underneath. You can still see some of that vibrant yellow and the green coming through. And this is because I'm making sure not to overdo the details. Now this is a key part, especially when working on a smaller scale. This portrait was only 8 by 12 inches, so it's not massive. In relation to that, the eyes were quite small. But I can still capture a good level of realism as long as I get my contrast right, the darks very dark and my highlights as bright as they need to be, and then I've got the balance of details correct. Because if the details are overdone and we cover up too much of the layer underneath, then we're almost back to square one. The eye will start to look flatter again, and this is because we've added too much detail. Now that obviously means that the contrast has to be right. If the contrast isn't right, but the details are okay, the eye will still look flat. So we do want to make sure that we've got this balance. But if I start to feel like I'm covering up too much of the layers underneath, then that tells me then that I need to ease off of the details I'm adding. In this situation, more details won't make it look more realistic. It's more about the values, and in this case here, that beautiful colour saturation. Now in my real-time tutorials, I don't speed anything up and I don't cut any of the sections of the tutorials out. It's all in real time with a voiceover while I draw, so I'm able to explain everything in the moment. And that also means that when I do create a mistake, I always make sure to show that and how to fix it. And here I didn't like the reflections that I had drawn in the pupil. So I've simply taken my black pencil and I have drawn over that, completely covered it up, and then started again. Now this is one of those times where this is potentially too much detail for this small area. So what I've done is scaled it down a little bit. I've made my lines slightly thinner so that I've got a little bit more room for that. Now in this situation, it would be where potentially you can hint at this reflection, but it's not going to be completely accurate compared to something on a much larger scale. If I was drawing this 16 by 24 inches, I'd be able to get this little detail as accurate as the rest of the eye. But I still wanted to hint at it. So here I've indicated at that, but I have just had to tone that down a fraction. Now the other eye really was a rinse and repeat process of what I've just shown. The light source here was fairly overall sort of standard, more across the front of the face rather than coming from one side. So this actually made both of the eyes, the colour and the lighting look very similar. Now if there is a light source from one side, there is always going to be a darker shadow and a brighter highlight on one eye compared to the other. So it's those key differences that we do want to capture and make sure that we've got in our drawings, which will really help to add more shape and form, add more realism and depth to the piece. So I do hope this video has been useful. If it was, I'd be very grateful if you could give it a like and a thumbs up. It makes a huge difference to my channel. I also upload a couple of videos to YouTube every week, so if you would like to get notified of that content, then don't forget to hit the subscribe and the bell button. If you are interested in drawing along to the real-time version of this cat tutorial, then I'll link all of the information to that in the description below. If you do have any art related questions, feel free to pop them in the comments below. I'm always happy to help if I can. And I'm going to be uploading another video next week. But as always, thank you so much for watching.